Well, we've just come through our Canadian Thanksgiving time, and we've thanked God for His blessings in our lives and for His provision for our needs and for the harvest season. Now, I'm a big fan of Thanksgiving and of the traditional getting together with family and enjoying fun. We always have a lot of great times. And of course, I'm especially fond of the feasting, the turkey and all the trimmings, and the day off doesn't hurt either. Well, in the Bible, Israel was big on Thanksgiving type celebrations as well. At various times in the year, they made a special effort to celebrate God's goodness to them. The Bible even outlines 7 specific feasts that were observed, often centering around certain harvest times and lasting for days. One of these Jewish feasts, which was still celebrated, is still celebrated today by many every fall, is called the Feast of Tabernacles. In fact, this year it just concluded. On our calendar, it went from September the 30th to October 7th. Well, during this feast, the Jewish people remember God's miraculous provision throughout the 40 years that their ancestors spent in the wilderness following their exodus from Egypt. And it's also a time to celebrate and rejoice over the ingathering of the fall harvest. Now, a tabernacle is simply a temporary dwelling place. And as Israel wandered in the desert awaiting their promised land, they couldn't put down any roots. Everything was temporary. Even God's dwelling place among them was called a tabernacle, a tent. We've heard a lot about that lately on 100 Huntley Street with the full-size replica of the Old Testament tabernacle at Crossroads throughout the summer. Even today, as part of the 7-day feast, many Jews build a small, rather flimsy booth out of wood and branches to commemorate those ancient times of wandering. They remember and are thankful because despite those very unusual conditions, God sustained them, providing water from a rock, manna as their daily bread. Their clothes and shoes never wore out, and they remained healthy. Amazing. One of the names given to God at that time was Jehovah Jireh, meaning God, our provider. That's certainly an appropriate name for all of us. That we can use that too, because we think of His provision during the season of Thanksgiving especially. It's interesting what the Apostle John wrote about Jesus in the first chapter of his gospel account. He said, "The Word became flesh and made His dwelling among us." Literally, He tabernacled among us. It's the same word. Jesus took on a temporary housing of flesh to fulfill His Father's plan of salvation and become the once and for all sacrifice for our sins. Talk about provision. That provided for our deepest need. Someday these temporary tents of ours, these earthly tabernacles, will not be needed anymore, and we'll enter into the amazing promised land that God has prepared for us, our permanent home for all eternity. The Apostle Paul wrote, "Now we know that if the earthly tent or tabernacle we live in is destroyed, we have a building from God, an eternal house in heaven, not built by human hands. Meanwhile, we groan, longing to be clothed with our heavenly dwelling." Well, Jehovah Jireh provides for our every need, here and now, as well as then and there someday in heaven. We simply need to accept the eternal, permanent provision we've been offered through Jesus, who took the penalty for our sin and offers His forgiveness and a forever relationship with Him. Now there's a reason for Thanksgiving.